I'm in a time crunch, so let's just get right onto the list.
Shame on you, Castlevania. You aren't realistic enough. Alucard doesn't even work in an office!
Masters of the Universe. I grew up watching the 80s He-Man cartoon on Cubo. It wasn't a nostalgic touchstone for me, but I remember it fondly enough. Now, considering the track record of modern-day adaptations of 1980s franchises, I had my concerns on how Amazon would choose to adapt this. And those concerns were certainly justified, as this movie is hot garbage. The biggest problem with this movie is how it portrays its characters. Now, it's been a while since I watched the original show, but I'm pretty sure He-Man should be portrayed as someone who is stoic and quick to adapt to challenges. However, this film decides to make He-Man awkward. And I don't mean just a little bit awkward. I mean awkward in literally every single line. I'm not exaggerating when I say that this movie refuses to give He-Man a single cool moment, even after he's unlocked his powers. For starters, after He-Man first comes to Earth, he gets a job as a human resources employee, which has to be the single least fitting job for He-Man to have. Heck, a cat food salesman would be a more fitting job, considering the original voice actor of He-Man also voiced Morris the Cat. While the 1987 movie was also very flawed, it at least understood the basic concept of how He-Man should act. And it at least gave He-Man a moment or two of triumph. Also, I can't stand Adam's boss with her stupid, I'm not mad, fake happy, condescending tone. And aside from that, the rest of the movie is awkward. From making Duncan into a drunken deadbeat, to making literally every character who interacts with Adam just as cringy as he is. Now, this movie does have its pluses. It's not as bad as the Animal Farm remake. Skeletor was funny, as he was pathetic in the original show. The actor of He-Man from the original movie cameos here. And I guess that scene where Adam's father accepts his son for being strange on his deathbed was decent enough. But still, this is a complete disaster on par with Get Smart 2008.
I can't believe it! Let me out of here! I'm going to sing!
Backrooms. Once again, I was disappointed by a movie I was hyped for. I've always found the Backrooms a fascinating concept, since it's a good mix of wonder and horror. As such, I was hoping this movie would be not just the standard horror movie. Now, for the first half of the movie, it's pretty engaging. The movie sets up the characters discovering the backrooms pretty well, and the scene where Clark and his two employees explore the backroom is fun, even if the way they end up falling down the pit is completely stupid. However, after that, the movie takes a complete nosedive. And this is because the protagonist arcs just are completely underdeveloped. I can understand why Clark would grow to feel more alive in the backrooms after the stress his divorce has subjected him to. And Mary has a good backstory, since it implies that her parent saw the backrooms and went insane trying to protect her from it. But after an engaging scene of Clark and his employees being chased by a pirate monster, the movie cuts to Clark having gone insane, with no build-up showing his descent into madness. And then Mary just decides to visit the store Clark worked and discover the backrooms in, and after only a minute of exploring it, she gets taken hostage by Clark. It feels like a good half hour of the film was cut out. Also, I'm confused what this movie was trying to say. After Mary finally talks some sense into Clark, he's suddenly killed by the pirate monster who represents his grief. Why? What was the point of making him learn a lesson if he was just going to get killed off before he could make up for his past sins? Now, I wouldn't have minded this as much if the Async company from Kane Pixel's Backrooms video series were more prominent, but after some good setup showing the Async employee discovering Clark and Mary in the backrooms, the Async employee just appears at the end to try to ask Mary questions, but then the movie ends by showing Mary as one of the monsters found earlier in the film. All of this makes the never-ending jump scares more intrusive to the viewing experience, since there's no scenes for me to get excited by. The reason I like movies like Return to Oz and Who Framed Roger Rabbit is because while there are scary moments, they're engaging to rewatch. But when you take out those engaging moments, you're left with empty dread, which, as a non-fan of horror movies, I can't stand. Don't get it twisted. I didn't need a madcap climax, but I would have appreciated if there were more scenes of Async, and if we saw Mary and Clark being intrigued by the wonder of the backrooms before they slowly went insane. But with all that said, we can now move on to a slightly better movie with room in the title, which I'm sure no one is going to disagree with me for placing higher than Backrooms.
Hi guys, my name's Cassidy Boone.
Hi, bitch!
That's right, The Room. I previously heard that this was the worst movie ever made, and from an objective standpoint, it is. The acting is bad, there are barely any sets, and there are a lot of awkward scenes. However, the story itself is okay. I like that all the characters are against the crazy girlfriend for being unfaithful to Johnny. Also, there are several funny meme lines. Lastly, the version I watched had a cutaway gag every time a vulgar scene came up. So there's that. If anything, I'm more just disappointed that this movie wasn't a complete train wreck like the '93 Mario Bros. Movie.
I'm sorry, but
Star Wars!
is dead.
The Mandalorian and Grogu. I haven't watched the original Mandalorian show, firstly because I'm not a big TV guy, and secondly because Disney and Pedro Pascal can go shove it. Now, I'll just get this out of the way now, this just feels like an extended episode of the show. Cars 2 haters be like. As such, nothing much happens in this movie, but it does have its moments. Grogu is cute, Mando is honorable, to the point I almost forgot who he was played by, and Rada the Hutt from Clone Wars appears here. I know I said I wasn't a big TV watcher, but one of the few shows I finished watching was Star Wars: The Clone Wars, so this is a rare moment where I understood the lore present in a show I've never watched. Also, I have watched the show, but I remember hearing that there was a character named Kara that was in this show who didn't appear here. I'm sure Disney treated her actress real nice.
He could jam, he could take a hit, he could keep on coming. But that flush slug in the heel is! He barely gets nicked there once and kaboom! He's history.
Troy. I decided to watch this in preparation for The Odyssey, a movie my interest in watching drops a little more with each passing day. Ironically, this film felt like a Christopher Nolan movie, in the way that it's good and certainly well made, but not a film I'm crazy for. But the film itself is engaging enough. I was constantly pointing to the screen anytime I noticed something I learned from mythology class, and unlike the Tron movie, that shall not be named, Garrett Hedlund appears here for longer than 2 seconds. Now, as for the flaws, this movie honestly feels a little short despite being nearly 3 hours long. I could have used with a little more build up to the climax, but still, this movie is good.
How's it going there, Gandalf? I know you're a cardboard cutout and you're not alive, but I'm speaking to you because I'm insane!
Glitch Productions' output of shows are a mixed bag in my opinion. Metarunner was decent, but took a nosedive in Season 3. I Can't Stand Murder Drones, and Gameoverse is just okay so far. However, The Amazing Digital Circus is definitely the best of their shows that I've seen so far, in part due to having a good mix of dark humor and relatable character moments. Now, I was initially worried that this would have a very dark ending, since this was the next thing I watched after Backrooms. However, I was pleasantly surprised to instead get a very satisfying, happy ending. Also, I feel like I should point this out now. Spoilers ahead. Be aware of that. For starters, just like the rest of the show, this episode is hilarious. Even the pre-show video had my whole theater on the floor laughing. Also, I like how Kane goes through an arc where he learns to let the other characters live their lives. And while it makes no sense for Kane to still be alive after seemingly being deleted, I like that he's humbled and makes peace with the other characters. But by far the best part of this episode was Jax's arc. Jax is my favorite character since he perfectly reflects that built-up sense of secondhand spite I often find myself feeling as a result of how mad this world makes me feel sometimes. For the last few episodes, I was worried that Jax was just gonna abstract and the characters were just gonna abandon him, even if I completely understand why they would. However, instead, Jax was the focus. And even though I'm not a fan of the context behind Jax's past, the way it's addressed is very sad and very well fleshed out. And I like that Jax finds peace at the end, even if he does abstract. But Cosmo wasn't voiced by Jack Black, so 0 out of 10, garbage episode.
We have technology.
Toy Story 5. Going into this movie, I was feeling a mix of intrigue and dread, since we didn't need another Toy Story movie. However, while this film's existence is still weird, it's better than Lightyear and Toy Story 4. For starters, Jessie makes a good protagonist. I feel it makes the most sense for her to be in the lead, since Jessie was the one who was the most scared of her owners outgrowing her. Also, Buzz was funny. I was initially worried Buzz would be just as stupid as he was in the last film, but fortunately, the angle the filmmakers win makes sense, even if the romance between Jessie and Buzz is a little bit much for me. I also like the new characters. Smarty Pants, Snappy, and Atlas are all fun additions. Lilypad reminds me of Anxiety from Inside Out 2, and she's also voiced by Eve from Tron Ares. Oh shoot, I just referenced a Tron movie that shall not be named! Also, I love the other Buzz characters. Lastly, I like that we get to see Jessie's old house. And the characters Blaze and Jimmy Dean were fun additions to the cast. Now, being the 5th Toy Story film, it makes the ending not anywhere near as triumphant as the previous 2 films. And it also would have been nice to see Stinky Pete at least make a cameo, since that was part of Jessie's arc in Toy Story 2. But overall, a great continuation of this franchise. I guess this means we're gonna get a movie themed around Buzz now, because clearly that's never happened before.
This is a close-up. A close-up, you jerk! A close-up!
Make Mine Music. This is the only Disney classic still not available on Disney+. Well, besides from a certain other movie released in 1946, but maybe that's for the best. And it's a shame Make Mine Music isn't on Disney+, because it was my favorite of the wartime-era Disney movies growing up. However, that was over a decade ago, so to commemorate the movie's 80th anniversary, I decided to give it another watch. And it was just as good as I remembered, with some things getting better and some things getting slightly worse. Since this is a package movie, I'm going to instead just rank each of the segments. Number 9, Blue Bio. Boring. 8, The Whale That Wanted to Sing at the Met. Silly. 7, Johnny Fedora and Alice Bluebonnet. Hasn't aged that well, and doesn't really fit the tone of the rest of these shorts. 6, Without You. A little bland, but has good music. 5, Two Silhouettes. Slow, but dreamlike. 4, Casey at Bat. Not as good as Baseball Bugs, but still really funny. 3, Peter and the Wolf. Nostalgic, fun, and memorable. 2, After You're Gone. A beautiful fever dream. And number 1, All You Cats Join In. My number 1 favorite Disney short of all time.
86, the Chief. Hold it, Larrabee. Who wrote Little Women? The play of the TV special. It was a play?
Hale Theater had a Wizard of Oz play this month, and this is one I've been looking forward to for a while. All the elements from the original movie are intact, and the added comedy is welcome, such as making Mrs. Gulch act more like a Karen, and also having Toto be a puppet accompanied by just some random guy who never speaks. But in addition to this, the play includes elements from the original Oz book, such as the jitterbugs and the Mouse Queen living in the Scarecrow's straw. That didn't sound weird at all. However, with this said, it's certainly not perfect. Well, one problem I had is that I had to constantly lean over to the side the entire show, since the guy behind me couldn't see the stage otherwise. But as for the objective criticisms, The Witch of the North was once again not mentioned. Why is The Witch of the North never included in these Oz movies? But jokes aside, while not quite as good as Hale Theater's Anastasia play, this is a close second.
Am I bragging about owning a gold cartridge? They aren't that rare, James. Get your head out of your ass and put on some clothes that fit you, for God's sake.
James and the Giant Peach. Now, I wasn't majorly excited for this movie, but it was the 30th anniversary of the film, so I figured I'd give it a watch. And I was completely blown away! Firstly, this movie perfectly nails Roald dolls, makes a whimsy and dark themes with a stop motion by Henry Selick. Secondly, each of the bug characters is lovable, from Miss Spider, who acts like a caretaker, to James, to Mr. Centipede, who is my spirit animal. But by far the best part of the movie is the villains. Even if Aunt Spiker and Aunt Sponge are hateable characters, the degree the writers ham up their jerkish nature just cracks me up. Such as when they charge a pastor double to see the peach, or when they have a photographer take their picture before they confiscate his camera. Truth be told, I like this more overall than Nightmare Before Christmas. Granted, Nightmare did have a better villain and better songs. Also, James is a little bit bland in this film, and the movie could have been a little bit longer, but still, this is a classic.
Who are you? I'm from the IRS, and I've come to attack charge.
Matilda. James and the Giant Peach wasn't the only movie based on a Roald Dahl book released in 1996 that I saw this month. Just like James and the Giant Peach, this movie is whimsical. However, there's also more comedic satire acted to perfection by Danny DeVito. Also, the bond between Matilda and Miss Honey is adorable. Granted, Matilda's friends could have been in the movie a bit more, but this is still fantastic.
We've come to rescue our friends, you evil vagabonds, and you will be defeated by the very outlaws that you scorn and detest.
Braveheart. Another movie I was banking on being the 10 out of 10 of the month, and another movie which did not disappoint. This is in the same boat as The Patriot in the way it masterfully tells a mature story while also having a sense of humor which never feels intrusive. Also, it's aged sadly way too well, considering the stuff which happens in the UK nowadays. But on a slightly more positive note, the friendship Wallace forms with his allies and how they constantly troll the Brits is funny. But apart from this, the scene where Wallace is betrayed is very well acted by Mel Gibson. And all this leads up to the amazing climax where Wallace, with his dying breath, inspires the citizens to fight for their freedom. There are a few nude scenes, but they are at least cloaked in shadows, so they're not too intrusive. Overall, this is an absolute masterpiece.